Hello guys, this is your friend Naruto Fanfic Series 2.0 and we are back with a new fanfic. Which is what if Naruto was forgotten by his family and trained by a legendary shinobi. Part 1. And if you enjoy this fanfic then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now let's start the fanfic. Scene change. Konohagakure. 7 years after Kyuubi attack. In the private training ground of the Uzumaki Namikaze estate, 5 individuals were engaged with training. A boy with shaggy blonde hair with brilliant red-tinted tips with deep cerulean blue eyes, standing at around 4 feet high. This was Menma Uzumaki Namikaze, third-born of the Uzumaki Namikaze family, who was chasing around his father Minato, as the two were laughing loudly. The other 2 children consisted of 2 girls of the same height of 4 feet, giggling and chatting happily with their mother Kushina. Second-born of the family was Mito Uzumaki Namikaze, who had her mother's brilliant red hair that went to the mid of her back tied into a ponytail and her father's cerulean blue eyes. The other was the youngest of the Uzumaki Namikaze family, Narumi Uzumaki Namikaze, who had inherited her father's blonde hair that was tied in a twin tails fashion with bangs similar to her father framing her face and her mother's violet-colored eyes. The scene now was a picturesque moment of a happy family spending time together, which would have been true if not for the pair of navy blue eyes watching his family partake in another activity without him. He was the oldest of the Uzumaki Namikaze children. He was Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze, having a darker shade of blonde and darker colored eyes than his family. After heaving a sigh, he returned to his room to finish his book, momentarily forgotten for the slim chance that he would be invited to play with his family. After reaching his room, he sat back down on the bed and continued where he left off. He drifted off to the world that the book offered for him as he contemplated his interactions with his family over the years. It's not going to change, it is. It's been this way for as long as I can remember, and I still don't know why they always leave me out when we do things. Ka-chan and Tu-san didn't used to be like this. They used to include me in things when I was younger, I just know it. Unknown to Naruto and his family was the contract that the Shinigami made all those years ago with Minato. Instead of his soul he took away the feelings of love that Minato, Kushina, and those who were close to the Uzumaki Namikaze had for Naruto, a twisted exchange that severed the bonds that he had with his parents and siblings and by extension, those associated with them. Though his parents did not neglect in terms of shelter, he had to learn to make his own meals and shop for clothes on his own. They did severely neglect him when it came to love. He was forgotten and rejected in favor of his more vocal siblings. Menma in particular ensured his parents pay no attention to himself by being more assertive and vocal with his demands, like when it came to where the family was to go eat and the like. This divide was not limited to Menma. Narumi and Mito both stayed a distance away from their older brother like he was an outsider, even though in the past they used to play together like normal siblings. However, that ceased happening years ago as Narumi began to act similar to Menma and Mito closed him off from any form of contact with her. From the situations that he's been in up to this point, he didn't think like it would be ending anytime soon. Letting his head fall onto his pillow, Naruto could only think about what his future would hold. He would rather be hated than completely ignored, but it seemed to the young boy that that was an impossibility. However, he would be starting his ninja training at the academy in the fall, so for now the future seemed brighter than it did in the past year. Time skipped 3 years later. Ka-chan, Tu-san, can't we learn any cool jutsu yet? Menma complained as he was balancing a leaf on his forehead. Little success, his mind set on learning something cooler like his father's Rasengan than something as boring improving his chakra control. Menma you need to learn to focus more if you want to be a super cool ninja like Ka-chan and Tu-san, right Tu-san? Narumi half lectured her brother and half asked her father as she was participating in the same exercise that her brother and sister. Sitting next to Narumi was Mito, trying to concentrate on her own leaf through the ruckus that her younger siblings were causing if the tick marks that were starting to become visible were any indicator. Menma, Narumi, could you two please quiet down? I'm having trouble concentrating since you two are being so loud. Mito finally said, releasing her ne-san aura, as Minato and Kushina called it. But undeterred by their sister's aura, the two started to argue as to who was better at balancing their leaf as her older sister sighed at the impatience of sibling. Laughing with his wife, Minato reassured the 3 that they would be learning something new soon as they gain a better grip on their chakra control. While Kushina listed off the reasons as to why they needed to polish up their chakra control or else they'd be just like her when she was a genin, a chakra powerhouse without any efficient way to use any of it, which seemed to have worked as the Mito started to work harder as her younger siblings quieted down and started to concentrate seriously with nervous expressions on their faces. As their children quieted down and started taking their training seriously, Minato and Kushina let their thoughts flow around the chaotic events that have occurred in the past couple of years. Kumo's failed kidnapping attempt on their family friend Hyuga's daughter, Hinata. Luckily Minato was on his way to the Inuzuka compound that night to drop off Menma when he spotted the Kumo nin carrying a sack and running. Naturally his response was to put Menma down and chase down the shinobi and apprehend him. Apparently he was a part of a splinter group made of Kumo nin who were remnants of a radical group back in the time of the Third Shinobi World War, who desperately wanted the Byakugan. Then there was the failed coup d'état orchestrated by Uchiha under the same masked ninja behind the Kyuubi's attack all those years ago. From the reports after the incident, those involved were under a particularly powerful genjutsu, warping their perceptions on the world and the things around them. Thanks to Kushina, Minato, Fugaku, Makoto, and their oldest son Itachi, things were settled with a few injured being the only casualties of the incident due to Minato and Kushina sealing the movements of the involved and to Fugaku, Makoto and Itachi using their Sharingan to disrupt the genjutsu. Finally their thoughts drifted back to their family, namely to their oldest, who wasn't taking part in training with his sibling. Mixed emotions were swirling within the two as they recounted their past interactions or lack of interaction with him. Confusion and despair began to fill their hearts as the reason as to why they were so distant to their oldest son eluded them, no matter how much they tried to remember. What happened? What? Why can't I find a reason why I've been ignoring him and leaving him behind? Agitated and confused, Minato mulled over the reason of his neglectful behavior towards his son. I want to be close to Naruto, but for some reason I can't open my heart to him and I can't help but feel as though that would put Mito, Menma, and Narumi in danger. Why? Why is that? While her husband was beginning to question if he was being paranoid or not, Kushina began to think of her oldest as well. I've failed as a mother to Naru-chan haven't I? I just can't open my heart to him for some reason. Whenever I try to get back into his life, it feels like something dark and cold enters my heart and I end up chickening out. What happened? Kushina began to feel as if a curse was placed on her to never love her oldest son, which was closer to the truth than she knew, though the truth wouldn't be known to her and her husband for a number of years. However, their thoughts were broken by a rather upset-looking Narumi. "Chu-san, Ka-chan, Menma ni is being mean and cheating. He said that his leaf was balanced and when I looked he blew mine off my hand. Then he said that he won because of that," tearfully complained Narumi holding her leaf in one hand while flailing her other arm in a comical fashion as Menma quickly defended himself. "I did not. Narumi is making things up again Chu-san. Ka-chan, ask Mito-ne, she'll tell you that I didn't do any of that. Right Mito-ne, I did balance my leaf and when I told Narumi the wind just happened to blow right at that moment and it was while I was telling her so it looked like I blew her leaf off her hand which I didn't do," Menma said in his defense, looking tearfully at his older sister for her support in his claim. However, that was not to be this time around. "Chu-san, Ka-chan, Menma did it. You know how he gets when he's in a contest, he'll do anything to win." Narumi was almost able to balance her leaf when Menma did that so he could win, Mito said, petting her sister on her head as Menma dropped his in defeat and embarrassment. Defeat because he knew he had lost the argument and embarrassment because he knew he would be getting a lecture from his father and mother. Sighing to themselves, Kushina and Minato looked at each other before bursting out into laughter at the antics of their children. Seeing their parents laughing, Mito, Menma, and Narumi couldn't help but start laughing and giggling along with them. Though they were laughing together at the moment, Minato and Kushina couldn't help but feel guilty that there was a member of their family that had been forgotten and neglected. Scene change. Unknown forest, unknown location. On the other side of the village, there was a boy no older than 10 years old working on his own exercises under the supervision of an individual who looked no older than 20 years old. "Ha, how was that sensei?" asked the boy, wiping the sweat on his forehead off with a towel handed to him by his sensei. "Well, what can I say? You're doing great Naruto, however, you're still stiff in some of your movements. You know that to use my style of taijutsu you need to have power, fluidity, and speed. But don't worry too much about it alright. You're only 10 years old remember," Naruto's sensei replied in a laid-back tone of voice. He stood at roughly 6 feet tall, having a muscular yet lithe build with short raven-colored hair spiked up slightly with a stray stand hanging off of on the side and an electric blue eyes that held a twinkle of mischief. Though, instead of round pupils his looked reptilian in nature. This young man was a memory from the last Shinobi World War, working as a shinobi for the village hidden under the sun Taiyogaku, that wished to remain neutral from the chaos that consumed the land, having no real military force due to being a rich agricultural village. Known during the war as Heaven's Catastrophe, due to his unnatural and terrifying mastery and control over wind, fire, and lightning. Ryuhei Shirokan had succeeded in his mission to protect Taiyogaku, inadvertently securing his title and page in the bingo books of various hidden villages due to decimating numerous parties that were attempting to take over Taiyogaku. Though, only a few survivors were able to make it back to their respective main forces and recall what they had faced. From the reports, it appeared that they had faced a demon in a man's body. Though the correct way to say it would be a dragon in a man's body. Born the only son of Tatsuya Shirokan and Ayane Hadanko, Ryuhei was trained in taijutsu by his mother and kenjutsu by his father. Learning ninjutsu and genjutsu from both of his parents, and later signing his family's private summoning contract which required finding a partner that matched his own style and personality. Eventually, his parents passed away by a disease that, from what his mother had told him, plagued their family for generations as a side effect from training alongside their partners, Ryuhei eventually contracting the same, dragon virus, that his parents had passed away from. "Nay, sensei, could I ask you something kind of personal? It's okay if you don't answer me though," Naruto timidly asked, slowly turning towards Ryuhei with a somewhat bashful expression on his face. "Haha, no need to be shy Naruto. I'm your sensei, you can tell me and ask me anything. Unless it's about women, I have no idea what goes on inside of their heads, and from what I've seen and heard, it's really kind of scary." Ryuhei happily replied, though towards the end of his statement he made a mortified face from admitting his lack of knowledge concerning women to his young student. First making an embarrassed face, Naruto's face quickly turned a little serious with a hint of anger seeping in at his sensei's nonsensical reply concerning him asking about something personal. "Sensei, I don't want to know any of that. And I don't care about that. I want to know why you won't go see someone so they can help cure you," Naruto barked out, finally having had enough of his sensei not taking his disease seriously after knowing about for so long. Wiping the mortified look off his face, Ryuhei's expression changed from surprised to solemn. "Ah, that's what you wanted to ask about I remember telling you that I wouldn't be able to be your sensei for very long when I started training you 3 years ago, guess you wouldn't have forgotten about that huh? Well Naruto, do you really want to know the reason why I don't take my disease seriously?" Looking at his student straight in the eyes and asking his question, he saw his student flinch before he nodded his head slowly. Letting a smile come to his face, Ryuhei walked up to his precious student, put his hand on his head, and ruffled his hair, Naruto bowing his head slightly while his cheeks flushed pink in embarrassment and happiness. "Well Naruto, the reason is because I'm going to die no matter what happens so why bother you know?" After hearing his sensei's reply, Naruto's head snapped immediately up, staring at his sensei with disbelief in his eyes. From disbelief, Naruto's eyes quickly shifted to anger and confusion. After removing his sensei's hand by grabbing his wrist, Naruto glared at him before yelling at his sensei. "What do you mean? Why bother? Exclamation mark. You're going to die Ryu-sensei. Don't act like you can't do something to cure yourself. You need to find a cure sensei." After venting his anger at his sensei's dismissal of his disease, Naruto began to tear up and started sniffling slightly, whispering something that spoke volumes about the feelings in his heart. "You can't die Ryu-nichan. You can't leave me alone. I don't want to be alone again. I hate being alone." After speaking from his heart, Naruto was crying and sniffling at the thought of being alone in the world again. Ryuhei was the one who talked, played, praised, lectured, and trained him. He was the father figure that he had always wanted, and now Ryuhei could be at the Shinigami's door at any moment. The very thought of losing him terrified Naruto to no end. Smiling solemnly and once again putting his hand on his student's he ruffled his hair gently. "Naruto, you remember what I said all those years ago when I met you for the first time?" Flashback. Scene change. Unknown lake. Sitting on the shoreline of a small lake, boy around 7 years old was skipping rocks alone. His dark blonde hair blowing gently by the breeze, his navy blue eyes filled with sadness and were red and puffy from crying, the tear streaks fresh on his face. His eyes were unfocused, indicating that his mind was somewhere else. Because of that, he didn't take notice of the person who had taken a seat right next to him until he saw another rock that didn't belong to him skip across the surface of the lake. Turning his head, he saw a large person wearing a tattered black cloak. Though he was afraid at first, he became terrified once the cloaked individual turned to face him and he saw their electric blue eyes staring into his navy blue ones. Though, that fear vanished once they turned away and skipped another rock. Confusion replaced fear, and timidly Naruto gathered the necessary courage to ask the stranger for an introduction. Hello, who or why you?" Naruto managed to squeak out, stuttering a bit as the fear returned. Turning back to face him, the stranger did something that Naruto did not expect. Or rather he laughed judging from how deep the voice sounded. "Haha, I was wondering when you'd do something. Though I was expecting the old, scream and run routine that most kids do when facing a stranger, especially if that stranger is as scary as people say I am." Laughing after his answer, he pulled back the hood of his cloak to reveal a youthful face and an energetic smile to the boy, who in response smiled back albeit shyly. "The name's Ryuhei Shirokan, but just call me Ryu. What's your name?" The energetic smile on Ryuhei's face grew into a grin, and finally introducing himself he asked for Naruto's in return. Smiling back a little more, Naruto introduced himself and the two started talking and asking things about each other. After hearing about Naruto's past and his relationship with his family, Ryuhei's expression darkened as he told Naruto what was on his mind. "Ah, I see, your family isn't really treating you like family, huh? Well, you know what I'd say to that, Naruto. I'd say that if they're not treating you like family, like they're supposed to, then forget about them," Ryuhei angrily said, rage burning in his eyes. Naturally, Naruto was taken by and frightened by his expression. From a nice and fun person to a person with a scary look in his eyes, Ryuhei's drastic 180 caused Naruto to flinch slightly, but he still managed to stutter out a reply. But they're my family, right? They're supposed to love me and see care for me." Ryuhei quickly lost his angry look as he sighed, looking at Naruto again. His eyes were sober, which again surprised Naruto. "If they were family, Naruto, you wouldn't be asking me that question, you know. Family is supposed to love you unconditionally, and care for you without having to be asked to. From what you've told me, they aren't your family. They're just people who share the same blood as you. That alone does not define family, you know," Ryuhei said, reaching out and ruffling Naruto's hair softly. After Ryuhei started ruffling his hair, Naruto, who has never experienced such a gesture, could only lean his head on Ryuhei's hand. Sniffling slightly, he timidly asked something that would change his life. "Then I'm alone. I've always been alone. So am I going to be alone forever then, Ryu?" Looking up with teary eyes, Naruto found Ryuhei giving him a warm smile filled and eyes filled with what he saw in his parents whenever his siblings were with them, love and compassion. "There's no way you're alone, you know. I'm right here. I've never been able to have siblings, or am I ever going to have children, you know. If people found out about their connection to heaven's catastrophe, they'd be hunted down for the rest of their lives just for being related to me. But, I'll ask you, Naruto, and you don't have to agree or answer me, but how about becoming my little brother?" asked Ryuhei almost bashfully, if the light dusting of pink on his cheeks were any indication. Snapping his head up, Naruto looked at Ryuhei with almost comical disbelief in his eyes, but more than that, they were also filled with hope. Hope that what Ryuhei was saying wasn't a twisted lie but an actual offer of becoming a part of a family. Launching himself at the young man, Naruto wrapped his arms around Ryuhei and buried his face in his chest. "Will really let me be your little brother? Are going to be my older brother but not care for me and leave me behind?" Naruto mumbled with doubt heavy in him trembling voice before asking something that made Ryuhei flinch slightly but quickly recover. "Will you always be with me and look out for me?" Ryu Nichin, slowly wrapping his arms around Naruto, Ryuhei brought a hand up to ruffle Naruto's hair gently. "If you're going to ask me like that, how can I say no?" Tightening his embrace on his new Otudo, little brother, slightly, he replied in a gently voice that soothed all doubts that Naruto had about his new Aniki. "No matter what, I'll always be here for you, Naruto. Even if I'm not here physically, I'll always be with you in your heart as long as you don't forget about me." Sniffling a little bit before he raised his head, Naruto, for the first time in a number of years, finally revealed a heart-melting smile. "Thank you, Ryu Nichin. Thank you for wanting someone like me." After seeing his Ototo's smile, Ryuhei could only smile back in return before hugging Naruto again. "And thank you, Naruto, for wanting to be a part of my family. I'll always be watching you and I'll do my best to make you happy and protect you. I promise." After which Naruto looked up and through teary yet happy eyes, he replied with a smile so bright the sun looked dull in comparison. "You already have, Ryu Nichin." Flashback end. Sniffling and nodding his head, Naruto looked up at Ryuhei and repeated the words that he told him all those years ago after they made their bond as brothers. "You said that you'll always be watching over me and that you'll always try to protect and make me happy." After repeating his older brother's words, Naruto received another round of head ruffling from Ryuhei. "That's right, so don't be sad, alright? I'll always be in your heart as long as you never forget about me and the times where we laughed, cried, and enjoyed with each other, alright? And here, I have something for you. An anniversary present. It's been 3 years since we made that promise to each other, remember?" Ryuhei said in a happy tone, handing Naruto a simple black and white scroll. Looking at his bother, then reaching timidly for the scroll, Naruto looked at it before voicing his curiosity. "Ryu ni, what's in here? It looks like a normal scroll. Is it another scroll for history or training exercises?" "Yeah, that scroll contains everything that I've collected over the years, including my family's scrolls, various weapons including my personal ones, and other things that you'll have to find out yourself." Before giving his brother a smile and patting him on the head. "But hey, we'll save that for next time, alright? Get home and we'll pick it up next time, alright?" Wiping the rest of his tears away, Naruto returned his brother's smile before giving him a hug which was returned tenfold. As he headed home for the night, Naruto felt something inside of his heart nagging at him to stay with his brother no matter what he said, but he figured it was because of the talk they had earlier. His brother would never leave him, especially after the talk of him possibly dying, right? The next day, Ryuhei never showed up. Scene change. Spiritual plane. Within the void of the spiritual plane, two beings of immeasurable power were discussing a topic brought up after 10 years of waiting. The first resembled a tall, fit, sickly-looking yet handsome man with snow-white hair. In contrast to his appearance from 10 years ago, he bore more resemblance to a human than the deity that most see him as. This being was known as Shinigami, the one who reigns over those who have died, leading them towards their respective paths in the afterlife. The second was a beautiful, curvaceous woman with long hair as black as the night sky. She was known as the goddess of creation and life, resembling what most would think the giver of life would look like. In contrast to their status as deities, they were acting rather human when comparing what they were doing now to what their godly duties were. Shinigami was prostrating in front of his younger sister Imouto while crying comically as he begged for mercy. Standing tall in front of him with her foot tapping and eyebrow twitching in irritation was a very, very angry Kami. Shinigami swore he could see himself behind her with pitying eyes directed towards himself as he would definitely be going to the after she was done with him. Well, what do you have to say for yourself, Niki? Kami spoke in a syrup-sweet sing-song tone of voice, a demonic smile on her face with her eyes closed, her brows still twitching in irritation. After hearing about his master plan, to remove the child of prophecy from earthly attachments in order to prevent one side from gaining the upper hand due to winning over his heart. However, he removed the attachments that were supposed to reside within her jurisdiction. He dealt with those who were dead and needed to pass over to the after, not those who were still living. I'm sorry, Kami-chan. I was just trying to ensure that the state of the physical world stayed in balance. I wasn't thinking straight. Having to deal with souls and the birth of the child of prophecy was stressful, and I didn't want to have to deal with more souls later on if one side gained the advantage. Forgive me, please. Begging his Imouto for any mercy on his soul, Shinigami pleaded, giving his reasons for usurping his control over an issue that belonged to his Imouto's domain. Sighing, Kami stopped her foot from tapping and her brow from twitching. Running her hands down her face, she could only groan at the complications that her idiotic Aniki caused. Not only did he interfere with the living, he probably ruined a family because he wanted to skimp out on work in the future. Opening her eyes and revealing her striking emerald green eyes, she glared at her brother. You idiot, do you know how much you messed up? You could have destroyed a family because of your laziness. You're such an idiot. Why do I have to deal with such a lazy, inconsiderate, sloppy, dumb brother like you? Kami roared, grabbing Shinigami by the collar of his kimono and shaking him violently while angrily lecturing him about his use of shortcuts to cut his time dealing with work down. After she finished lecturing her brother, she dropped him, panting, trying to catch her breath after her angry lecture. Laying on the ground with his normally onyx eyes replaced with swirls, Shinigami could only thank whatever other god had saved him from his Imouto's wrath. After regaining his conciseness and composure, he explained the situation with the child of prophecy to his sister along with what has happened in his life. Naturally, he was beaten badly, due to his regenerative abilities tied to his status as a god. His Imouto doesn't hold back. After his beating, his sister looked at him, her eyes still angry but now serious. Seeing the look in his sister's eyes, Shinigami quickly became serious as well. Aniki, how do you know that one side won't gain the advantage? From your reports, he doesn't care for his family anymore, and by extension the village that they reside in, due to their neglect and ignorance of his existence. What's to say that we won't turn on them if another village or power tempts him with the offer of power, wealth, or family? A child isn't capable of thinking rationally with their mind, as most of their logic and reason stems from their emotions. He could be unstable and that could cause an imbalance. You know that just because you can observe him doesn't mean you know the inner workings of his psyche. Kami stated, not trusting that her brother knew what he was doing or even what he was thinking. Removing the love of a family was a twisted act in of itself, but then removing the hope of ever feeling love from the place that was growing up in, that was the most twisted thing that her brother had ever done. Looking his sister right in her eyes, Shinigami didn't flinch like he normally would from her glare. Kami-chan, I know that I've made a lot of mistakes in the eternity that we've known each other, and I do mean a lot of mistakes. But this isn't a mistake. I know that I removed the feelings of love from that child's family and village, and I know that what you're telling me is true. But what I haven't told you yet are the final pieces of information from my report regarding the one who has taken that child under his wing. At the end of that statement, Kami lost her glare as her eyes widened by minute amount. What? Don't tell me that a single person has secured the loyalty of the child of prophecy for themselves. Kami shouted, fearing for the state of the physical plane if a corrupted individual had managed to place the child of prophecy under their control. But her concerns were lost as her brother shook his head with a small smile gracing his features. No need to be concerned, my dear Imouto, the one who secured possibly the only position within that child's heart has passed on. At his statement, Cammie's eyes widened considerably. Concern and fear evident in her voice, Cammie couldn't help but shout her question at her brother. Don't tell me that he's unstable now. There's no way that a child would remain sane having the only source of love ripped from them. But again, she was met with the same smile as before. Like I was saying before, you rudely interrupted me, Cammie-chan. Cammie had the decency to blush at her actions. The one who has shown that child love also made it known that he would be passing on into the after well before his time came. That act alone will most likely cement the fact that the child of prophecy will remain neutral in the physical plane. Though his heart will be frozen over, he will not vent his anger and hate on the world. He was raised by one of the Shirokan after all, and you know that they were ones who always managed to steal their hearts in times of great pain and hate. He will undoubtedly carry on that ideal, as from what I have seen, he cared a great deal about that person. Now, I will be slowly removing the curse, which in 3 years' time will be completely lifted, at which the village's genin exam will commence. By doing that, it will ensure that he will form no permanent bonds with anyone within the village, and that his bond to the one who showed him love cements itself within his heart. That'll secure his neutrality within the physical plane. Looking slightly confused, Cammie decided voice her confusion as she didn't understand why he would remain neutral after all that will possibly happen in the future. Wait, Aniki, why would he remain neutral? Won't people ignoring him after he's experienced love make him hate them more? Especially if his family continues to love each other and continues to leave him on the side, or if his siblings or others harass and antagonize him due to him being a social outcast of the village. But once again, her brother reassured her with a smile. Don't worry, Cammie-chan, he won't give in to that hate. He was raised by his brother to have a strong and sturdy heart that can endure than a weak one which would give in to the hate. I assure you on my status as the one who reigns over death and as your older brother that he will not give in to the hate that the physical plane has. Trust your Aniki once in a while, all right, Shinigami confidently said, looking at his sister with confidence radiating in his eyes. Her brother's confidence eventually won her over as she accepted his plan. All right, Aniki, I'll trust you. Just don't do this kind of thing ever again without consulting me first, okay? Cammie bashfully told her brother. Chuckling, he wrapped his arm around his sister's neck and pulled her in, ruffling her hair as Cammie turning bright red with the sudden show of affection. However, her blissful moment of bonding with her brother was ruined. Nay, Cammie-chan, why are you so red? Don't tell me that you're getting sick. Gods can't get sick, can we? Her eyebrow started to twitch as her brother immediately started freaking out about gods catching mortal illnesses, until she finally snapped. Flushing red with anger, Cammie kicked her brother where the spiritual sun don't shine. Then she huffed and walked away as her brother collapsed to the ground, writhing in agony, clutching his blessings. HMPH, males are all stupid, human or god, Baka Aniki. Cammie angrily said the first part but mumbled the last part, her face still slightly red with anger and embarrassment. Time skip 3 years later. Scene change. Konoha Academy. Konoha's Academy, a place for children to prepare for a career of being a shinobi or kunoichi to protect and serve their village. In the classroom being headed by Chunin, Iruka, Yumino and Mizuki were the next generation of potential ninja that would be united under the will of fire. In this particular class held the most notable students in the academy. Sitting in the front row was Menma Uzumaki Namikaze with his best friend Kiba Inuzuka, son of the Inuzuka clan head. Beside them were Menma's sisters, Mito and Narumi Uzumaki Namikaze with their best friends Yukumo Kurama and Hinata Hyuga. Next to them were the Uchiha twins Sasuke and Satsuki, their usual scowls present. Behind them in the second row, were best friends Shikamaru Nara and Choji Akamichi, sons of the Nara and Akamichi clan heads respectively. Next to them sat Ino Yamanaka, daughter of the Yamanaka clan, and Sakura Haruno, the daughter of a renowned civilian family, best friends and rivals in love, for the affection of two most popular boys in the class. Finally, in the last row of the room sat the quietest individuals of the class, Shino Aburame, son of the Aburame clan head. An aisle next to Shino sat Sai, a quiet and artistic individual with no known family. Lastly, next to the window in the back sat Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze, the oldest of the Uzumaki Namikaze siblings and the most distant. As Iruka and Mizuki called roll before getting ready for the genin exams, everyone quieted down, some nervous, others excited for the exam to commence. The exam consisted of multiple parts, a written portion which covered basics in history and tactics. A physical portion which consisted of taijutsu sparring with an instructor and the use of kunai and shuriken. And lastly a ninjutsu portion which tested the proficiency of using the Academy 3 inches, the three being Henj no Jutsu, Bunshin no Jutsu, and Kawarimi no Jutsu. All of which were needed to be used successfully in order for an academy student to pass. However, there was an extra credit or replacement opportunity in which if the student performed a jutsu outside of those three, which would replace the one that they had failed to do or add extra points to their exam, which could be the difference between becoming the Rookie of the Year. Seeing the looks of apprehension and excitement on his students' faces, Iruka couldn't help but smile and formally begin the exams. Alright, well, I know a lot of you are nervous and excited, so let's begin. After which, they started calling students to test. Overall, all of the students of this class had passed, with many exceeding the needed benchmark, which made Iruka a proud teacher. However, when it came to the oldest of the Uzumaki Namikaze, he couldn't help but feel a little guilty, having seen how far behind he was compared to his other students. He knew about the stigma that Naruto held, being the oldest child of the clan yet being the weakest. Iruka knew that he should have tried to help his student more, but he couldn't for some reason. He blamed it on the fact that it would have probably be seen as favoritism, and he didn't want that, but looking back, it probably would have been the right thing to do, despite what people would have said. Naruto was probably tied for dead last of the year, next to the children who weren't serious in becoming ninja. He managed to pass by the skin of his teeth on the written and physical exams, scoring usually 1 point over the failing threshold and landing his kunai and shuriken 1 over the needed amount to pass. Something about those results seemed strange to Iruka, but he brushed it off as mere coincidence. Snapping back to the present, Iruka found himself staring into the navy blue eyes of the very student he was thinking about. No matter how many times he saw it, the lack of life that should be in a student's, no child's eyes, were non-existent in his. Naruto's eyes were dull and didn't hold the twinkle or spark that other kids his age had, rather his eyes looked like they were neutral to the world. But he quickly regained his focus, and proceeded with the exam. Smiling widely, Iruka handed Naruto his headband with a congratulation in hand. Congratulations, Naruto, I know that you'll succeed out in the field. However, instead of a smile or hug, he got a blank stare, a small bow, and a quiet, thank you, before his student left the academy for home. I feel like you're going to become a great shinobi, Naruto. I'm sorry that I couldn't support you through your schooling here, but I'll definitely try and help you out there. Looking at the retreating form of his student, Iruka expressed his final thoughts, before calling the next person in line for the test. Scene change, outside the academy. After receiving his headband, Naruto put it into his pocket before he started on his way home. The last few years since his Aniki had passed were difficult, not from the treatment that he received from the people around his village, but from the scroll that he received from him. Looking back, when he was coping with Ryuhei's death, he was acting like a spoiled brat who had their favorite toy taken away, angrily lashing out at anyone and hating the world for taking away the one person who cared for him in the world. But that all changed once he actually looked inside of the scroll that his brother had left him. Flashback start 2.5 years ago. Huddled on the same shoreline that him and his brother were on when they first met, Naruto still couldn't get over the fact that his brother was gone, even after half a year of grieving. Why do I always have to have something taken away from me? First it was my family's love and now Ryu-nichan. Why? Naruto was growing progressively more angry and hateful at this world who took away the only person who cared for him, and was about to do something regrettable that was until a scroll fell out of his backpack as he stood up. Looking down, he immediately recognized it as the last gift he had gotten from both his brother and anyone in the past few years. He had forgotten about it, having never opened it after figuring out that he'd never see his brother again. Holding the scroll carefully, it unraveled it and saw a seal. Recognizing it as a simple storage seal, it released whatever was inside, which was a note. Reading it over, Naruto started to tear up, tightening his grip slightly and by extension crumpling the note a little. Naruto, if you're reading this, then you probably know that I'm not going to be with you any longer. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry, Naruto. I'm sorry that I won't get to see you graduate the academy. I'm sorry I won't get to celebrate your birthdays anymore with you. I'm sorry that I won't be able to embarrass you on a date with your girlfriend. I'm sorry that I'm such a horrible brother. I know that you'll probably never forgive me for leaving you behind, but know this, know that I'll always be looking out for you. Even now, I'm looking out for you. I know that you're upset, hurt, angry, sad, and 100 other things, but never give in to any of those negative emotions, Otudo. They only lead to pain and more hate. I know that you're stronger than that. I'm the one who did train you, remember? Naruto, inside this piece of paper is what I promised you on that day. It contains a large scroll which can only be opened by smearing you blood on it with a little bit of chakra, and it contains everything that I said it would. It has my life savings, down to the last Ryo sealed within. My family's techniques and secrets, my own techniques and secrets, the weapons that I've collected and my own swords. It also contains all of my research on information on various things in the world that I hope you never reveal to anyone else. In addition, it also contains my family's summoning contract. Once you're old enough, sign it and you'll be reverse summoned to Thousand Blade Mountain, the home of the dragons. Yes, Naruto, the same dragons that I told you stories about. Once there, don't be afraid. They all act mean, big, and scary, but once you break past their scales they're all very kind and loyal. Ask for my partner, Joe, and tell him that you're my little brother and he'll defend and vouch for you. After all that is settled, find a partner who'll complement you and that you can bond with. You'll know when you find them, trust me. Naruto, remember that no matter what anyone says, you're the strongest and kindest person that I've known and had the pleasure to call my Otuto. Don't give in to the hate that plagues this land, rise above it and prove that you have the blood of a dragon running through your veins. I've made a training schedule of Tai, Nin, Gen, Ken, Kin, and a little bit of Fuinjutsu for you for the next few years along with training from the elders, until you turn 18, and I know that you'll be able to follow it and benefit from it. After that I'm sure you'll have already mastered everything that I've to teach you. Lastly, find someone who you can relate to and get to know them. Find someone who you can trust without reason, and if possible, find happiness with someone, Naruto. I know that you'll make me proud, and that you'll become a great shinobi. So until we meet again in the afterlife, Naruto, remember that I love you and that I'm always watching over you. By the end of the letter, Naruto was sobbing loudly, wiping his tears away with the sleeve of his jacket. After sobbing for over half an hour, Naruto made a promise to himself that he would follow what his brother asked him to do, to train and to hopefully find happiness. But as far as Naruto was concerned, becoming strong was the top priority on his list. The first thing he did was nick his thumb, smear his blood over the seal and begin training. Ryu Nichan, I will become strong, so that once we meet again, I'll be able to stand next to you as your brother. Flashback end. Sighing to himself, he could only be embarrassed that he acted like he did, his partner would be mortified if he ever found out. But once he got over Ryuhei's death, he began to notice things that started to unnerve him greatly. Over the past 2 years, he started to notice that people were starting to pay more attention to him. It originally started out small with people actually looking at him, instead of through him. That would have been fine, as he didn't really want anything to do with people, as his only objective was to follow his training schedule. However, last year was when it got to the point where they started talking to him. Originally he wanted to ignore them like they had done to him, but he remembered that his brother asked him to be above hate, and doing that would undoubtedly cause people to hate him, so he settled for giving quick responses, which worked for quite some time. That is until his family started to try to talk to him. Menma was the same arrogant and obnoxious person Naruto remembered him to be. Mito and Narumi acted like nothing had ever come between them, talking to him in an overly familiar way which irritated him to no end, and his parents were the worst. They tried to coddle him like some child. They were a few years late for that, as he was already self-sufficient by the time Ryuhei had adopted him as his younger brother. It got worse when they tried to include him into their training sessions, which he always skipped out of, their training years behind his in his opinion. Though he desperately wanted to snap at them and demand the reason as to why they were suddenly acting like he always existed, he knew it would be waste of time. In the end, he treated them the same way he treated everyone else, distant and without any form of attachment. But slowly, Ryuhei's words of not giving in to the hate and finding happiness in his life were starting to take effect on him. While knew he wouldn't love his family, he wouldn't hate them either, at least not until they did something to garner one or the other. His thoughts were broken when he spotted the same people he was just thinking about, his family happily chatting with other families about their kids. Closing his eyes and ignoring the happenings around him, he just carried on his way home, that is until someone put their hand on his shoulder. He didn't even need to open his eyes to know that it belonged to his father Minato. Cracking one eye open, he glanced at his father with the same dull look in his eye and questioned him as to why he was stopped. Is there a reason why you're stopping me? Naruto asked, his voice quiet without a hint of warmth or familiarity. Minato had seen his oldest walking out of the classroom alone, without waiting for his siblings to finish. Deciding that it might help mend the relationship that they had, he stopped his son. However, while he expected the tone of voice and look that his son gave him, it still pained him greatly. Over the course of the past 2 years, Minato had begun to notice that he didn't feel the unease that he used to feel when he saw Naruto. Before, he felt the same way he did about a stranger interacting with his family, but that slowly started to change. At first he was suspicious, but as time went on, the feeling of unease completely disappeared and it was replaced with a longing to reconnect with his son. However, his plan to reconnect Naruto with the family failed miserably. He avoided speaking to any of them for more than a sentence, 2 if they were lucky, and when he did speak he spoke with an overly formal manner, his voice quiet and without a hint of warmth, not even calling him To-san and Kushina, Ka-san, anymore. It was like speaking to a stranger one had just met. Though Minato wasn't deterred, he was set on reconnecting the bond that they all once had. I wanted to ask why you're leaving already. Aren't you going to wait for your siblings to finish Naruto? asked Minato in a soft tone of voice, a voice Naruto had only recently been exposed to personally, and it unnerved him slightly to hear it from someone other than Ryuhei. However, Naruto answered, "I'm sorry Minato-san, but I would rather not wait for them. Please excuse me." Though as he turned to leave, he was met by red-headed Missile, his mother Kushina. Kushina, like Minato, lost the apprehension that she used to have when she saw and interacted with Naruto and was doing her absolute best to try and get her son back into the family. Though she was met with the same treatment as her husband and everyone else for that matter. "Naru-chan, congrats on passing your genin exams. Where were you going? You're going to wait for your siblings to finish, right?" Kushina released Naruto from her hug and asked him in confused manner. She then looked at Minato and saw him shake his head, which made her frown. "Naru-chan, you need to wait for you siblings, you know. It's only polite since they're you family." Kushina scolded Naruto, however he just looked back at her with the same blank navy blue eyes before retorting. "Kushina-san, you know that they've never been made to wait for me before. Why should I be expected to wait for them when they haven't shown the same courtesy to me?" Naruto questioned, and Kushina winced at this dismissal of calling her Kaken, but brushed it off, though she found herself unable to answer his question. He was right in his statement. She never made any of her other children wait for their older brother, but this only served to fuel her desire to unite her family once and for all. "Naru-chan, I know that we're not on the best terms as family. I know that for a long time we've been very bad parents and your siblings haven't been the best either. But we're still family, you know, and family needs to care for each other and stick together." Kushina spoke in a soft tone, looking at her oldest in the eyes. Once Kushina said those words, Naruto's mind flashed back to the memories that he shared with Ryuhei, then to the words that he had told him about what a real family was. Family is supposed to love you unconditionally, and care for you without having to be asked to. From what you've told me, they aren't your family. They're just people who share the same blood as you. That alone does not define family, you know. Snapping out of his short stroll through his memories, he figured it would be less of a hassle if he just entertained their request. Crossing his arms, Naruto turned towards the academy, waiting for his siblings to emerge. Seeing their oldest listen to their request and accept it made Minato and Kushina happy beyond words, if the matching smiles on their faces were any indication. They knew that they would have a long and difficult road towards rebuilding their relationship with their son, but they owed it to him. The guilt and shame that plagued their hearts were unfathomable, seeing how their oldest was practically a stranger in his own family tore at their hearts, and they knew that it was their fault and theirs alone. Over the last 2 years, the feelings that they should have always had for him slowly started to surface for the first time in their lives. That alone confused and frightened them. From viewing their oldest son as a stranger and potential threat to the safety of their family to seeing him as what he really was, as their oldest son who they love and care for, it baffled them to no end. But after having a heart-to-heart with each other, Minato and Kushina had promised to reconnect their oldest and give him the love that he deserved and more. Soon, the two were broken out of their thoughts, as they were the telltale signs of their youngest daughter, if her shouting of "Tu-san" and "Ka-chan" were any indication. Narumi's day couldn't have gotten better. She had just passed her genin exams and made it as one of the top contenders for Kunoichi of the Year and Rookie of the Year, along with her brothers and sister. Though, there was one thing that did make her sad and that her heart yearned for, that was the love and attention of her oldest brother, Naruto. She knew that she was never the ideal little sister towards her brother. Ever since she could remember, she felt afraid of him. When they were growing up, she could remember that whenever she would try and ask him to play with her or talk to him, there would be a feeling of fear that would overtake her heart and cause her to stop. It only got worse as she grew up. As she got older, whenever she would see her big brother, something inside of her as a human being screamed that he was dangerous and to stay away from him at all costs. Of course, she was a child then and followed her instincts, but looking back she regretted every moment of it. Though, the last 2 years were strange. The primal fear that she had for her brother slowly started to fade away, and in its place was replaced by adoration and desire for her brother to accept and forgive her for all she's done. Now the only thing that stood in her way of loving her brother was himself. But that wasn't going to stop her from getting what she wanted. Everyone knew that an Uzumaki never gave up until they've got what they wanted. After catching the sight of her mother's striking crimson hair and her father's brilliant blonde, Narumi cheerfully ran towards them. Happiness and excitement filling her heart, she was about to launch herself at them until she caught sight of a slightly darker shade of blonde next to them. It was her brother, Naruto. Her brother was waiting for her. He was really waiting for her. Did he finally forgive her? A light dusting of pink colored her cheeks as she changed the trajectory of her hug and instead of her parents, launched herself at her brother. Narumi squealed happily and with affection, as she met her target, wrapping her brother in a hug. Narumi, did you wait for me? Did you really? I hope you didn't wait too long. I'm sorry if you did. I really am. Narumi fired off questions as to how long her brother had waited and if he did it especially for her. To say Naruto was uncomfortable would be putting it lightly. While he did expect to be greeted by his exuberant younger sister, he wasn't prepared to be glomped by her. Unless it was contact from sparring, he didn't do well with physical contact with others, he wasn't quite used to it yet. Slowly, he managed to detach the blonde from himself and was met with a pout in return. To answer your question, Narumi, I am waiting for all of you to finish. And no, I didn't wait long. Naruto replied in his usual deadpan voice. Though that didn't deter Narumi for long. After hugging and getting a congratulations from her parents, she went right back to Naruto and hugged his arm to her chest with a cherry smile on her face. Okay Naru-ni, we'll for Mito ne and Menma ni together then. Narumi chirped with a smile on her face, much to Naruto's chagrin. Naruto could only sigh as his sister giggled as she tightened her grip on him. Off on the side, Minato and Kushina could only smile at the scene. Narumi always managed to ignore the cold and distant aura that Naruto had, and it always warmed their hearts to see their youngest able to breach the armor around their son's heart. Soon, they spotted the blonde and crimson hair of their remaining two children, both with smiles on their faces. Menma was feeling like he was on top of the world. Not only did he destroy the Genin exam, he was sure that he'd be the one who'd become Rookie of the Year. However, his mood quickly rose as he saw his family waiting for him with smiles on their faces. Quickening his pace, he ran towards them only for his mood to drop like a rock in lake. He saw his brother there as well. It was well known in the village that Menma didn't like his brother. The word most would use would be detested or disgusted, however that wasn't how Menma truly felt. Menma had admired his older brother when they were young, always imitating what he would do when they were children. But as he grew older, he began to feel inferior to his brother for some reason. It only grew as they did, Menma becoming more vocal and demanding when Naruto would speak his mind or give a suggestion, in order to overrule Naruto's suggestion with his own. Eventually, Menma's feeling of inferiority turned into dislike, which eventually created a gap between the two. During the past 2 years, Menma's feelings of inferiority and hate began to fade away, though he still did not view Naruto as his equal nor treat him any differently. Menma had seen his grades, both written and physical, and he knew that he was definitely stronger and smarter than his brother. Menma wouldn't be apologizing to his older brother anytime soon, not until Naruto is able to stand as his equal. Though in a small part of Menma's heart, he honestly did want to become close to his brother again so that they would be able to do things that only brothers are be able to do, like talk about which girl is the cutest, pulling pranks together, and especially train together. But being as prideful as he was, Menma wouldn't be admitting that anytime soon. His face visibly souring, Menma sneered at his brother. What the heck are you doing here, loser? Shouldn't you still be begging sensei to let you pass? Menma spat out, his eyes narrowed. Minato and Kushina were well aware of their son's volatile relationship, but they didn't think that it was this bad. But before they could say anything, the final member of their family spoke out in her older brother's defense. Mito was happy, rather she was ecstatic. She had seen her older brother pass his test and the possibility that they would be on the same team had increased. Like Narumi, when she was young, Mito had a primal fear of her older brother for some strange reason. But like everyone else, within the last 2 years her fear disappeared and was replaced with the same adoration and desire for her older brother's love and affection that Narumi had. Though unlike her sister, Mito didn't rush in like Narumi did, her philosophy was try and slowly work her way back into her older brother's heart. But there were times where she would break that, and this was one of those times. Menma, didn't you see that Naruto ni was one of the first to earn his headband? You're always sitting in the front, aren't you? Mito said, her eyes narrowed at Menma's insult towards her older brother. Though, when she saw her younger sister so closely attached to him, Mito's eye twitched in both irritation and jealousy. But before anything else happened, Naruto decided to finally speak up. Well, now that the exams are over, I'll be seeing you all later. Managing to once again pull his arm free of his youngest sister's grasp, Naruto started walking away, unconcerned with the slightly hurt look in his family's eyes and the angry look in Menma's. Guess making him wait for everyone to finish was asking for too much, Mina-kun. Kushina said sadly, looking at the retreating form of her son. Feeling an arm wrap around her waist, Minato pulled her in close and gave her a reassuring squeeze. It'll be okay, Kushi-chan. After comforting his wife, Minato turned towards his remaining children. Alright kids, why don't we go get something special to eat in honor of all of you becoming genin? Instantly he got eager nods from his kids, though one voiced her concerns. Nay, Tu-san, what about Naru-ni? Shouldn't we go get him? Narumi asked the question on both her and Mito's mind, and even a tiny bit of Menma's. Smiling at her consideration of her older brother, Minato patted her head. You know how your brother likes his space, Umi-chan, we'll all be able to have dinner together one day. I promise. Seeing his daughter sadly nod her head, he decided to lead them into the village for a night of celebrations. Scene change. Unknown lake. Arriving at his destination just as the sun was starting to set, Naruto once again found himself at the lake where he and Ryuhei met, a gentle breeze blowing. Smiling slightly, he reminisced about the fond memories that he had with his older brother. Reaching into his backpack, he pulled out a familiar scroll. Unsealing small bottle of sake and saucer from a seal that read, "Graduation." Naruto filled up a saucer and smiling, he poured it carefully into the lake before filling it once again to down it himself. The bottle only held enough sake for 2 saucers and that was enough for Naruto. Laying down on his back, his arms crossed behind his head, he let his mind flow back to the times he shared with his older brother as he closed his eyes. As Naruto listened to the soft blow of the breeze, he didn't notice the silhouette of a person sit down next to him. As the wind blew his hair gently, the silhouette slowly reached over and ruffled his hair softly. As he felt a very warm and familiar sensation, Naruto slowly descended to the world of sleep. As his mind slowed, the ambient noises of the wind quieted to nothingness, he caught a voice in the wind. Naruto fell asleep, never noticing the tears that were falling down his face and the small smile on his lips. Congratulations, O Chudo. Scene change. Hokage's office. Inside the office of the Hokage, 2 figures could be seen discussing a topic that was on the minds of everyone who were associated with the newly graduated genin, that topic being the teams that they would be placed on. Heading the meeting was of course, Minato. Being the Hokage, he had the final word as to who was on what team with which instructor. Given a record of each individual genin, listing their strengths, weaknesses, special attributes, and other notable traits. The second was the final of the Densetsu no Sannin, Orochimaru. Orochimaru was once considered a traitor, having been arrested after suspicion about what went on in the lab that he operated. Having no doubts about his innocence, he willingly let the Anbu squad led by Minato and Jiraiya search his lab. However, what he didn't expect was to be attacked by his best friend and Minato then have suppression seals put on him. At first he was outraged, demanding why he was being arrested, but soon that anger turned into shock as he saw what was inside of his lab. His lab, normally spotless and sterile, was covered in blood and gore. At first, he thought it was a genjutsu that someone had placed on him, but after futilely trying to release it, he knew that it wasn't an illusion. After he was taken to Ibiki Morino for interrogation. Though, after he asked that they have Inochi Yamanaka to prove his innocence by reviewing the past few hours of his life, they apologized and released the seals on him. During the interrogation, they had found that it his second apprentice Kabuto who had framed him. Kabuto had been stealing information and resources from his lab for his ex-teammate Hirako, who was banished after his experiments on human subjects were found by Orochimaru and Jiraiya. Though, they were unable to find Kabuto even with multiple squads of Anbu dispatched throughout the village. After the incident, Minato and Jiraiya apologized for their mistake, Jiraiya especially. However, he brushed them off saying that they were only doing their duty and that he would have done the same. Originally he was bitter and angry that his sensei and the Sandaime Hokage, Hiruzen Sarutobi, had chosen Minato as the Yondaime. But after Hiruzen talked to him about his reason, he grudgingly accepted. But slowly, he grew to like the boy thanks in part to Jiraiya forcing him out of his lab to meet with him for a drink from time to time. Now, he was the head of the torture and interrogation force and main consultant when it came to building teams, as he oversaw all outgoing genin from the academy and had some insight as to what went on inside of their minds due to his position. That being said, Minato, what do you think of those for the potential team builds? Orochimaru asked, showing Minato a diagram with multiple different team compositions, ranging from tracking, assault, and support. After pointing out the candidates that would only be able to fill one role due to their skill set, he brought out a chart showing the candidates that could fill multiple roles in a squad. So far the teams look great, thank you Orochimaru. Minato expressed his sincere thanks, as squad building in the past was a difficult process of basically putting genin together and seeing if they would work or not. But with Orochimaru, squads that have been assembled with his insight have had a 94.7% rate of successful squad dynamics. But I am concerned about one thing. Orochimaru was a little surprised, as usually Minato almost never any qualms over the suggestions that he made, though he had a sneaking suspicion as to what it was about. What's your concern, Minato? It's over your children, isn't it? His suspicions were validated when Minato rubbed the back of his head in embarrassment. Minato voiced his confusion as to why his oldest wasn't included on the possible squad list. Yeah, you hit it right on the mark, Orochimaru. I wanted to know. I didn't see Naruto's name on any of the squad suggestions that you showed me. After hearing his question, Orochimaru sighed. Minato, you and I both know that your oldest son was treated like he never existed by both his family and the village, myself included. Though we both know that, because of that he doesn't trust anyone, not even you. Orochimaru stated, seeing how Minato was about to retort. Do you know how he performed in the academy, Minato? After hearing the question, Minato frowned and nodded his head. I do, Orochimaru. From what I hear from practically everyone, he's the dead last of the academy. Even more so than the students who weren't serious on becoming ninja. His performance on the written and physical exams bring barely passable, it's actually a miracle that he passed. Minato said, his voice thick with guilt and shame. That being said, have you ever seen his actual scores and performance on the written and physical exams? Seeing Minato shake his head in the negative, Orochimaru took out Naruto's file and handed it to Minato. After taking it and opening, he didn't see what Orochimaru was trying to hint at. Though he did wince when he saw how poorly his son did. Seeing that Minato didn't get it, Orochimaru could only sigh. You don't see it, do you, Minato? Isn't it suspicious that his grades are more varied? How on every single exam, physical and written, he has managed to score 1 point above the failing threshold? That alone warrants suspicion. It's as if he is deliberately placing himself low in order to conceal his strengths. Now that I'm thinking about it more clearly, I'm sure that he's intentionally hiding his skills. Though for what reason, I'm not sure of. Orochimaru said, his brows furrowed in thought. Minato just couldn't wrap his mind around why his oldest would intentionally hide his skill if he was as skilled as Orochimaru was making him out to be. But why hide his skills? If he has the skill, why doesn't he show them to everyone? It sounds as if you're making him out to be a prodigy. If he was, he'd be the talk of the village. That's why I didn't place him with any of squads that I made, Minato. I don't want you to take this the wrong way, but my personal assessment of him is that he's a potential flight risk. He trusts no one in the village and because of that has no loyalty or love for it either. As soon as Orochimaru finished his assessment, he was met with an angry and accusatory glare from Minato. What are you implying, Orochimaru? Are you saying that my son is a potential threat to his squad mates and sensei, and a threat to the village? Minato wasn't happy that Orochimaru thought of his son as a threat to the safety of his ninja and village. He knew that his son wasn't treated the best, but he wouldn't turn on the village. Would he? Seeing that Minato was feeling conflicted on this matter, Orochimaru relented. Minato, I'll assign Naruto to a squad on the condition that my apprentice be his sensei. Not only because I trust her and you trust me, but she's one of the only people in the village that would be able to assess his mental state from observation alone. The only others being myself, Jiraiya, Tsunade, Ibiki, and Shizune. But I don't think that they should be removed from their posts for one genin, even if that genin is possibly unstable and your son. Minato thought about the situation deeply. On one hand he wanted to trust his instincts that his son wasn't a threat, but considering that Orochimaru said about him trusting no one was undoubtedly true, eventually, he had to place his village over his son as much as it pained him to do so. Alright Orochimaru, let's go with your plan. I'll trust that Anko won't be too. Anko, right. Seeing Orochimaru's wry smile in return, he could only hope that his son doesn't get pushed to the edge by his sensei. Well, now that we have that settled, let's rebuild the squads then. Starting with the ones who have the most flexibility in regards to possible positions. As he brought out a rooster and proceeded to highlight and circle prime individuals. Scene change. Naruto's training ground. Back in the area that he and Ryuhei had first met, Naruto was going over his plan for the future. Having become a genin, he had also become an adult in the world. His first order of business was to move out of the compound that his family lived in, and find his own place to call home. The second regarded a much more serious topic, the being the dead last facade that he had built up over the past 4 years. It had worked as he intended in getting people to underestimate him, even if he was the son of the Hokage. But the problem now lied in whether or not he actually started to act seriously. Making such a large jump in skill would definitely raise alarms with everyone that knew him, especially his family, but considering no one ever paid attention to him, he could just write it off as him not trying because it wouldn't be worth the effort. That seemed like a plausible yet paper-thin excuse, but it'd do. He didn't need to explain his reasons to anyone. The final topic was one that was a bit touchy, but he needed to get over it. Now that he would be moving out and he was an adult, he needed to get over the fact the village basically erased his existence from it. While he wasn't going to betray the village or curse it, he wouldn't love it. It'd be just a place where he ate, slept, and worked for. The same would be applied to the people of the village. He'd act professionally with his teammates, his sensei, the merchants, villagers, other ninja, and his family. He wasn't going to let anywhere near his heart ever again. He'd pardon their past transgressions, but that'd be it. His plan set, he headed towards his soon-to-be ex-home. Time skip. 1 week later. Scene change. Konoha Academy, Iruka's classroom. Seeing the uncontained energy and excitement of his students, Iruka could only smile at them. Until they were ignoring the fact that the bell had rung. All right everyone, sit down and quiet. Implementing his village-renowned Kyoto no Jutsu, his students immediately quieted down and finally focused their attention to him. Good, now that I have your attention, I'll be naming the squads that the Hokage has assigned you to. Starting with the students with limited skill sets, the squad list slowly approached the rounded genin. Team 7 will consist of Menma, Mito and Narumi Uzumaki Namikaze. Your sensei Kakashi Hatake. At that moment, many groans and complaints rang out about the newly dubbed, strongest team, Team Hokage's kids. Most were about the loss of their crush to be on their team. Though the genin involved only let their heads pound the desk, the unfortunate luck of having to stick with and deal with their siblings even when out on missions, and of having to deal with their perverted and habitually late older brother figure. After quieting down the class once more, Iruka continued. Team 8 will consist of Hinata Hyuga, Kiba Inuzuka, and Shino Aburame. Your sensei, Kurenai Yuhi. Team 9 is still active. Team 10 will consist of Ino Yamanaka, Shikamaru Nara, and Choji Akamichi. Your sensei, Asuma Sarutobi. At that, Ino practically broke the desk she was at when her head slammed onto it. Crying about how she was put on the worst possible team, while behind her Shikamaru muttered a quiet, Mendokuse. His eye twitching slightly at the rude behavior of his student, Iruka could only sigh before continuing. Team 11 will consist of Sasuke Uchiha, Sakura Haruno, and Sai. Your sensei, Genma Shiranui. Though, he was once again interrupted when Sakura rose out of her seat and flashed a victory sign at Ino, claiming that the power of love prevails over all obstacles, as Sasuke let his head drop. For the final time, Iruka could only drop his head at his student's behavior before calling out the final team. The final team will be Team 12, which will consist of Yakumo Kurama, Satsuki Uchiha, and Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze. Your sensei, Anko Mitarashi. At that, the class went deathly quiet and some slowly turned their eyes towards the back where their most distant classmates sat. Of course, the lull was broken when Iruka announced that their senseis would be coming to pick them up soon. As soon as that statement left his mouth, Kurenai arrived to pick up her team. Following her were Asuma and Genma. Left in the room were Team 7 and 12, Team 7 already knowing that they had a long wait ahead of them. After half an hour, the window flew open, followed by a kunai attached to a banner that read, "The great and sexy Anko Mitarashi has arrived," as a smoke bomb went off. Out of the smoke emerged Anko wearing her signature grin and glint in her eyes. Seeing the disbelief in the eyes of the genin, she couldn't help but snicker at them. Well, which of you brats belong to me? If you're a part of my team, then we're meeting at Training Ground 12 in 15 minutes. Don't be late or I'll hunt you down. On second thought, please be late. It'll make things more fun for me. Ya nay. After saying her part, she jumped out the window. After processing what just happened, Naruto let out a sigh as he stood up and walked out the door towards the training ground. Seeing their teammate leave, Satsuki and Yakumo followed him out the door, leaving Team 7 behind. Scene change. Training Ground 12. Arriving with 3 minutes left to spare, Naruto, Satsuki, and Yakumo stood awkwardly as they waited for their sensei to arrive. But they didn't have to wait long, as a pouting Anko dropped from the tree that they were standing under. You brats are no fun at all. It would have been more interesting and fun if I had to find and drag you here. But oh well, why don't we get to know each other? Anko happily said, but instead of a quick response she got blank stares. But that was quickly broken when Yakumo raised her hand to ask a question. Anko-sensei, could you begin? I don't think that we know the proper way to introduce ourselves. Yakumo asked, unsure on how to break the ice with her new team. But her concerns were eliminated as her sensei gave a grin and started things off. Well, I'm Anko Mitarashi, as you all know. My likes are snakes, Orochimaru's sensei, my best friend Kurenai, dango, poison, sharp things, and reading. My hate perverts, rapists, people who act like they're superior to others, bad dango, and a boring book. My hobbies are working at the T&I division and hanging out with my friends. And my goal is to one day surpass Orochimaru's sensei as his apprentice. Now that I'm done, why don't you go next since you asked? After her introduction, Anko turned towards Yakumo and decided that she was the next one to introduce herself. I'm Yakumo Kurama, nice to meet all of you. My likes are reading, training with my tutor Kurenai sensei, reading, mochi and being with my family. I also hate perverts, rapists, people who mock others for stupid reasons or reasons outside of their control, and people who look down on genjutsu users. My hobbies are cooking, gardening, flower arranging and training. My goal is to repay Minato and Kushina-sama for sealing off the Edo and giving me back my life, and to surpass Kurenai-sensei as a genjutsu master. Yakumo stated with a small fire burning in her eyes towards the end. After her introduction, Anko pointed towards the scowling Satsuki. Nice to meet you, Yakumo-chan. So you're the one that Nai-chan always talks about, huh? Why don't you go next, Miss Sunshine? As Yakumo blushed slightly, Satsuki growled at Anko and received a grin in return. I'm Satsuki Uchiha. My likes are training, reading, cooking and gardening. I hate perverts, rapists, weaklings, useless people, and people who break their promises. My hobbies are pretty much the same as my likes. And my goal is to surpass my brother Itachi as a ninja and my mother as a woman. Satsuki said in her usual snarky tone, though it turned surprisingly bashful when she mentioned surpassing her mother as a woman. Smirking at her, Anko finally pointed to the only male member of the squad and gestured him to begin. Alright, well the ladies are done, so why don't you introduce yourself, Blondie? Half expecting a twitching of the eyebrows or a glare, Anko was a little surprised when all she received was a blank stare from Naruto. My name is Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze. I don't have many likes, though one is ramen. I don't have many dislikes either, though most of them are shared between us like perverts and rapists. My hobby is training. As for my goal is to make someone proud of me. Introducing himself in his usual deadpan, Naruto finished his introduction. Though his goal caused quite a stir within his squad, all of them knew that he had no bonds to speak of, so this person he wanted to make proud had to have been someone special. And who would that be? Blondie? Very curious, Anko asked the obvious question, however she was met with his patented blank stare once more, followed by, "It doesn't concern you." Which irked her a lot, but instead of acting on it now she decided it was a good time to let her genin know about the test that they would be given. Well, now that most of us have introduced ourselves, she shot Naruto a look. You're still not truly genin of the leaf yet. You all still have one more test that you need to get through before you're field ready. So, tomorrow, meet back here at 10 a.m. sharp and don't eat any breakfast. I promise you that you'll just see it again within the hour. With that, Anko disappeared in a swirl of leaves using the Shunshin no Jutsu. After their sensei left, Satsuki and Yakumo gave each other a glance. They weren't on the best terms but weren't on the worst either. Most of this stemmed from Satsuki and Mito's rivalry, Yakumo somehow getting caught in the middle. However, they were on a team now, so it was in their best interest to get along, at least that was Yakumo's train of thought. Satsuki, I know that we're not best friends or friends at all, so why don't we start now since we're on a team now? Yakumo asked, hoping that she'd accept her offer of friendship. Satsuki really wanted to just leave and go home to train or cook or do something other than get along with Mito's friends, but she knew that she'd get an earful from her parents and older brother if she didn't at least try to get to know her, so she just sighed and accepted. Sure, whatever, just don't try and be all chummy with me, we're not friends, just teammates. And don't tell Mito either, I'd rather not hear her complain about how I'm stealing her best friend. Nodding to Satsuki, they too began to head towards the center of the village, but before they left the training ground, they froze. Remembering that they had one more teammate, they turned around to see that he was already walking away reading a scroll. Looking at each other, they didn't know what they should do, though they settled on trying to invite him, considering how that was the most that they've heard him talk, so they assumed that it would be alright to ask. Naruto, do you want to come get dinner with us? We might as well, considering we're all on a team now, so we should try to get along. Yakumo asked, as they managed to catch up to the blonde. However, she was met with silence as he was too engrossed in his scroll to notice her and Satsuki. While Yakumo was a little amused, having had moments where she also tuned out the world when reading, Satsuki didn't take being ignored too kindly. Growling while she stomped towards him, she grabbed his shoulder and forced him to stop. Naruto was almost finished with the scroll that the elders had given him when he felt a hand on his shoulder and smelled sweat with the hint of Lily of the Valley, and upon turning around he was met with an angry Uchiha. Is there something that I can help you with, Satsuki-san? Naruto asked, wondering why the usually brooding and scowling girl stopped him. Are you weak and deaf? We've been trying to get your attention for the past minute. Kami, why did I have to be paired with you out of all of the other Uzumaki Namikaze? Menma would have been better, I'd even settle for Mito. As Satsuki went on a tangent, Naruto could only stare at her blankly, as Yakumo sighed beside her. Having had enough of her rambling, Naruto poked her on the forehead similar to how he had seen her older brother do, and the reaction was almost instantaneous as she snapped out of her rambling immediately. What are you doing, you idiot? Just don't touch me whenever you feel like it, you pervert. Satsuki shouted, her cheeks tinged red with embarrassment and anger. It was then that Yakumo decided to step in before things got even more complicated than they already were. Naruto, Satsuki and I wanted to know if you wanted to get dinner together to celebrate our new status as a team and to get to know each other better. So will you come with us? Yakumo asked politely, hoping that he'd accept their offer. They got their answer when the scroll he was reading disappeared in a puff of smoke and he stared at them with his ever-blank eyes. You two have a point, we might as well get to know our strengths and weaknesses, knowing how we can complement each other could greatly benefit us in the future, including on the test tomorrow. Naruto stated, and from the stunned expressions on his teammates' faces, they weren't exactly thinking on the same terms. After that, a blank-faced Naruto, a wryly laughing Yakumo, and a scowling pink-faced Satsuki enter a popular barbecue restaurant to get to know each other better. For the better portion of the night, there were laughs heard from the booth as the three, or rather Yakumo and Satsuki, exchanged stories from their past, while Naruto chose to remain silent as he didn't have many fond memories that he was willing to share, though he did share a story about an incident he was involved in that included a corrupt merchant, bees, honey, ants, paint, a bikini, and cameraman. He didn't expect the normally brooding and scowling Satsuki to burst out laughing and snorting as tears began to fall from her eyes, or the reserved and polite Yakumo to laugh so much that she started crying with her sides hurting. The night ended with the three parting ways, Yakumo and Satsuki in better moods and a small smile gracing their faces. Scene change. Uzumaki Namikaze compound. As he walked through the front door, he was greeted by the sight of his family chatting and eating dinner happily amongst each other. Though he was used to the sight, it still caused a dull ache in his heart. As he was quietly making his way upstairs towards his room, he was spotted by his more expressive sister before he could make it up the stairs. As Narumi was happily chatting with her family about her new team, though her brother and sister lacked the same enthusiasm she had, she spotted a familiar mop of blonde hair and her night instantly brightened up even more. Standing up on her chair, which Kushina instantly started scolding her, she called out to him. "Naruni, where have you been? Why are you home so late? Come down here and have dinner with us." As soon as those words left her mouth, the rest of her family's head snapped to where she was looking. But she never got a response as they heard the door to his room being closed softly. Knowing that her brother wasn't going to be joining them, Narumi sank back into her chair and slowly continued to eat, sad and hurt by his indifference. While Narumi quieted down, Mito continued looking where she had seen her brother with longing in her eyes before she went back to her meal quieter than before. Menma continued seemingly unaffected by his brother's indifference, though inside he was wondering what his weak older brother was doing out so late. Minato and Kushina were both hurt and upset by the attitude and behavior of their oldest. Hurt that he didn't greet them when he got home, and upset that he made their youngest sad by his attitude. The two exchanged sad looks before they continued with dinner, knowing that the happy mood and light was spoiled. Scene change. Naruto's room. As Naruto entered his room, he contemplated on what would be the test for tomorrow. Knowing the strengths and weaknesses of his teammates, it would definitely make things go by much more smoothly than having to assume what they were in the heat of the moment. Most likely they would have to go on a mission as a show of proficiency and their ability to operate as a unit. Starting tomorrow, he would be able to drop his facade and actually experience the world as a capable shinobi. Laying down on his bed, Naruto slowly fell into a dreamless sleep. Scene change. Training Ground 12. As the morning sun laid lazily overhead, Naruto, Satsuki, and Yakumo were sitting under the large sakura tree that laid in the center of the training ground. Satsuki had her scowl on her face, though she was sneaking side glances at the only male member of their squad. Yakumo was reading a book, and like Satsuki, she was sneaking glances at Naruto before focusing back to her book and repeating the process. Naruto was immersed in a scroll that contained information about team dynamics and how to best operate as a unit, including tactics, positions, weakness, and mistakes. Eventually, the lull of the moment was broken as their sensei made her explosive entrance, literally, as a smoke bomb exploded with her jumping out of it, her signature grin on her face. "Well, looks like you're all ready for the test, I assume." Seeing the scowl, small frown, and blank look, Enko couldn't help but sweat drop slightly at the less than expressive faces of her students. "Well then, why don't we begin? The test we'll be having is the good old-fashioned bell test. All you have to do is take a bell from me and you pass. Simple, right?" Enko said happily, pulling out 2 silver bells out of her pocket. As soon as they saw the bells, Yakumo voiced the concern that all genin who received the test had. "Enko-sensei, but they are 3 of us. Why are there only 2 bells?" As soon as the words left her mouth, Enko revealed a devious smirk before saying something that instantly set her genin off. "Because, the one who doesn't manage to get a bell from me is going to go back to the academy and repeat the whole thing over again." Enko chirped happily, relishing in the tense and stressed expressions on her genin's faces. Though, she did notice that the only male of the squad had his blank stare still in place. "All right then, let the test begin." As soon as she said that, the 2 female members rushed into the woods, leaving her and Naruto behind. Raising an eyebrow, she gave Naruto an confused look. You know that you're supposed to hide and plan, right?" However, instead of a reply, Naruto walked back to the sakura tree and sat down, opting to finish reading the scroll and partake in the test at the moment. Enko could only gawk at the audacity of the kid. Not only did he not answer her, which alone would have involved her using sharp things to make him answer her, he ignored the fact that he had a test going on. But she was broken out of her thoughts as a volley of shuriken forced her to jump back to avoid being hit. Satsuki was angry. She was angry and tense, most of which came from the stupid test that her sensei had given them. Not only would one of them fail, they'd have to go through the whole academy again, and that was something she wouldn't be taking a part of. After she had hidden herself in a few meters back, she saw her idiot of a teammate just give up, without lifting a finger. She knew that he was the dead last of the academy, but that didn't mean that he should give in without a fight. Not that she cared if he passed anything like that, but then she noticed that when he was walking back to the tree, her sensei let down her guard and she took advantage of it by throwing a handful of shuriken and charging in. After closing in the distance between, she started the bout with her sensei off with taijutsu. Enko grinned, seeing that things were finally about to get interesting. Satsuki quickly fell into the rhythm of her clan's Kenkan. The key component of the Uchiha clan's taijutsu relied heavily on using one's Sharingan to predict the moves of the opponent and respond with quick yet powerful blows, hence the name. However, Satsuki, not having her Sharingan yet, couldn't utilize it to its full extent. Quickly throwing a flurry of jabs and kicks, Satsuki quickly grew frustrated as Anko avoided each of her attacks like they were nothing. Throwing another hook towards Anko's midsection, Satsuki had her wrist grabbed cold, knocking her off balance. Responding by twisting her body, she tried to deliver an axe kick but hit air as Anko backed away. Well, I'll admit, Gaki, you're not too shabby at your taijutsu, for a genin at least. Anko's taunt seemed to have the intended effect as she saw her student's face flush red. Growling, Satsuki rushed in again and threw another punch that was deflected, quickly spinning around she a backhand at Anko that she avoided by crouching and sweeping Satsuki off her feet. Regaining her balance, Satsuki quickly went through a series of hand seals that made Anko's eyes go wide. Finishing the last of the seals, Satsuki glared at Anko before taking in a deep breath. Sweden. Teppadama, firing off a quick basketball-sized ball of water that hit Anko and sent her flying back before she was replaced with a gouged-out log. Whoa, that's one dangerous jutsu, Gaki. I'd be torn up for sure if I got hit by that. You need to be more careful. Dropping out of a tree, Anko praised and scolded Satsuki, but before she finished, her rain of kunai forced her to perform another kawarimi. Jumping out of the brush, Yakumo had a kunai in a reverse grip as she headed towards Satsuki, who wasn't happy to see her. What are you doing here? I don't need your help to get a bell, you saw that I almost had her right there. Satsuki was really frustrated. Being toyed with by her playful sensei didn't sit well with her at all. Satsuki, I know that you're frustrated. But please listen to me. Though her teammate was irritable, Yakumo knew she had to get her to calm down or else they'd all fail. Seeing the angry but now focused face of her teammate, Yakumo began her assessment of the current situation at hand. We know that we need to get those bells right. From what we talked about last night, we don't know any of Naruto's skills, and going by his performance in the academy they probably aren't the best. That being said, I think we'll be able to get those bells with just the two of us. I don't like leaving him behind, I really don't, but we need to pass. I think this will work, so here's the plan. Making a guilty face, Yakumo shot a glance towards their still reading teammate before relaying the plan she had devised to Satsuki. To say that she was surprised was an understatement. Satsuki had always thought that Yakumo was someone who was all about being friends with everyone, but seeing her leave Naruto out didn't sit well with Satsuki for some reason, but she needed to pass, so she agreed to the plan that she created, which was crafty in her opinion. Seeing that her two students were finished with their group huddle, Anko walked out of the brush with her grin still in place. Are the two of you time with your little team meeting? Kameon, let's get things going again. Satsuki and Yakumo flashed through the hand seals for their respective jutsu, with Satsuki rushing in while Yakumo stayed back. Interesting, Satsuki is coming in to apply pressure while Yakumo is most likely setting up a genjutsu to throw me off. Not shabby for a couple of rookies, thought Anko as she avoided another teppadama from Satsuki before she heard Yakumo. Kanashibari no jutsu, Yakumo called out, as Anko felt a slight stiffening in her body as the genjutsu took effect. As Satsuki closed the distance once again, diving low for the bells that were tied to her waist. As she felt the cool touch of the metal, Satsuki couldn't help but smile as the plan that Yakumo made worked. But as quick as the feeling of success came, it left as Anko grabbed her wrist and locked it behind her back, making Satsuki yelp in pain as she was forced onto the ground. Yakumo's reaction was the same as Satsuki's, elated that her plan had worked, but her hopes were crushed as their sensei had broken out of her genjutsu and subdued Satsuki without any problems. Grinning from ear to ear, Anko couldn't help but be impressed by the show of teamwork of the two girls. That was some good teamwork, girls. Having one of you keep the pressure on me while the other immobilizes me, that was some plan. But then again, it wasn't good enough. As she finished her statement, noticed that the last member of the squad had disappeared, she wasn't the only one, as Yakumo and Satsuki had noticed as well. Huh, where did Blondie go? Did he go home or something? Enko asked. Seeing the confused expressions on her students, she figured that they had no idea either. But as she was about to get off Satsuki and go find him, she immediately jumped back to avoid a kick to the head that cut off a few hairs on her head. Enko was shocked, her eyes wide. She didn't notice him until the last second. If she had been any slower, there's no doubt that she'd be hurting or even unconscious. After his kick missed, Naruto quickly grabbed Satsuki in a princess carry, ignoring her shouts to let her go, and jumped back to where Yakumo was. Putting the now scarlet Satsuki, he turned back to Anko and rushed her. Fast, was the unanimous thought of the group as Naruto stopped in front of Anko and proceeded to take her on in taijutsu. Damn, he hits fucking hard. And on top of that he's fast, this is getting bad, my arms are starting to go numb. Anko grunted, feeling the heavy blows of her student as she blocked and parried his attacks, though she was caught off guard as a kick broke through her guard and sent her stumbling back, spittle flying out of her mouth from the heavy blow. Though his assault didn't stop there, as he charged in and slipped in behind her. Satsuki and Yakumo could only let their mouths hang open as they saw the scene unfolding in front of them. The dead last of their class was holding his own against a Jonin, and the apprentice of Orochimaru no less. Anko was starting to get pissed. She had underestimated this brat and he was actually starting to push her back, the apprentice of one of the Sannin. Catching her balance, she turned around with an kick that was blocked by Naruto. Following up, she threw a heavy punch that sent her student reeling back. Not letting him get his balance, she tackled him to the ground, straddling him and pinning his arms to the ground, a vicious smile on her face and a predatory glint in her eyes. That fucking hurt, Gaki. I thought you were the dead last. There's no way that you are with those skills, why hide it, huh? Anko questioned him, leering close to his face. Behind the two, Satsuki's face was once again scarlet, looking at the scene of her sensei straddling her teammate. Next to her, Yakumo covered her eyes, her scarlet face matching Satsuki's. But they were broken out of their embarrassed states when Naruto shouted at them. As Anko straddled him, Naruto reversed the grip she had on his wrists and held onto them tightly. After doing this, he turned towards his teammates and shouted at them to grab the bells. Satsuki, Yakumo, she's open, grab the bells now. Hearing their teammate actually shout at them, they too quickly rushed towards their now immobile sensei to grab the bells. After hearing this, Anko tried to break free, but her student's grip on her wrists wouldn't budge. Knowing that it would be futile, Anko just sighed, knowing that it was checkmate. Minutes later, a smiling Satsuki and Yakumo were standing next to a blank-faced Naruto as Anko massaged her sore wrists, courtesy of the blonde in front of her. At first Anko sighed, but then she gave the three a grin as she knew that, unintentionally, they had managed to figure out the test. Congrats brats, you all pass. As she congratulated them, she was asked the question at hand by Satsuki. But Anko-sensei, we haven't decided on who would get the bells yet. Satsuki questioned, knowing that Naruto would probably get one since he did give them the chance to grab them. She would definitely fight for that second bell though. I need to have that second bell. Naruto is going to get one for sure. But it's not because I want to be on a team with him or anything, I just don't want to go through the academy again. Yeah, that's right. While Satsuki was having an internal debate as to her intentions of wanting the bells, Yakumo was having a similar one. Naruto is most definitely getting a bell, I would really like the second one though. It would be nice being on a team with someone as reliable as him if he's as skilled as what I saw. But that's not saying Satsuki isn't reliable either. However, their inner thoughts were broken by Anko, who revealed the true reason behind the test. That's true, but the real reason for this test was to test your ability to work as a team. At first, you all were going to fail. But with that little stunt at the end, I can see that you all have a future as a pretty powerful squad if we can work out the kinks. So yeah, Team 12 is official. As the words left her mouth, Satsuki and Yakumo revealed a dazzling smile while as Anko gave them all a grin. As they turned to the only male member of their team, to their complete shock and awe, he had a small smirk on his face, though it vanished quickly. Satsuki and Yakumo quickly turned their heads away, cheeks flushed, while Anko revealed a predatory grin. Well, looks like things are going to be interesting after all.